After months of trial and error working to try and figure out the answer, I have reached the conclusion and I'm excited to sit down and talk about this stuff. So without further ado, this is the year smartphones went wild and became the best year in smartphone release history. Hey guys, I'm Ryan Thomas and I know what you're thinking. Right, surely you are far too bored of talking about old phones by now, right? Wrong. Also, don't call me Shirley. The thing is, there are heaps of factors in what makes the best year for smartphones. There are pillars like the iPhone, the Lumia 1020, the HTC One and so on. But I reckon 2019 was the best year. And let me present to you my argument for that. In fact, March 2019 alone was absolutely crazy, probably the best month in smartphone history. Kicking things off with Samsung's Galaxy S10 lineup, and I really do mean lineup because this was absolutely stacked. The standard S10 was already absolutely gorgeous with a great camera setup that had a variable aperture, and now with the ultra-wide for the first time in the S series. But this was flanked by the even cooler Plus model, the fun and quirky S10e, which I still adore to this day, had a capacitive fingerprint reader and was a great little compact flagship. And then there was the S10 5G, which took the Plus and just sort of put it on steroids. 6.7-inch panel, an additional time of flight sensor, more RAM on the top end, and the colours that the S10 series came in were absolutely out of this world. Great devices that were sort of a middle ground between old school and new school. You had thin bezels, punch holes and an in-display fingerprint scanner in most of the models, but you also had the micro SD card slot and the headphone port. Serious phones these. Nokia then launched the 9 PureView. Do you remember this thing? The penta-camera array on the back combined to take photos with layers, so you could adjust the depth of field in post just in the camera app. Despite all those sensors being pretty small in the grand scheme of things. It was part of the Android One program, so it was guaranteed timely updates with super clean software. This was one of the most quirky and interesting phones to come out in the last 10 years. It's a real shame that we aren't seeing this kind of thing from HMD, perhaps with a bit more polish though. And March 2019 isn't even over because a little Chinese firm called Huawei then dropped what some consider to be the best phone of all time. I think I might be part of that crowd. It built on the hype and success of its predecessor with the huge primary sensor, now an RYYB, that could genuinely see in the dark. The P30 Pro now had a 5x optical periscope lens that wasn't the world's first, but it certainly popularized the technology that we'd later find in pretty much all flagship smartphones now. It had great battery life, came in eye-catching colors and set the bar for what we should expect from high-end smartphone cameras, all before turning out to be the last Huawei flagship release to come with Google Play services and be supported by Google, which probably elevates it a bit in the list. In May, Google debuted the cut-down A series with the goal of getting the Pixel name out there and then also the Pixel devices into more pockets. The 3A was a slam dunk in the mid-range and made its full-size counterpart almost a little bit redundant in some people's eyes, as it proved that software was king for Google at the time, as you were able to use almost all of the exclusive best Pixel features without spending a fortune. Go and check out my individual video on the 3A on this channel, by the way, because comparing its camera to the Pixel 9 Pro really shocked me, to be honest. OnePlus then decided to drop the 7 and the 7 Pro, and I'm not gonna lie, it's the latter that really stole the show here. Massive 1440p 90Hz screen when Samsung and Huawei were still using 60Hz panels. It had a pop-up selfie camera with the triple camera on the back, insane performance with the 30-watt dash charging, and a design that was to die for. It looked like something out of a sci-fi film. It wouldn't look out of place today, it's insane. And running the proper version of Oxygen OS 2 with the 3-stage alert slider, what a phone. This wasn't even OnePlus's only banger this year, because sure, the spec bump 7T Pro came out and that was really cool, but the standard 7T was fantastic. It had that triple camera array on the base model for the first time in OnePlus's history, heaps of battery and performance specs, Oxygen OS, the alert slider, once again wrapping up an unbelievable smartphone package. A standout phone in 2019 for me really has to be the Realme X2 Pro. Since OnePlus was already sort of making higher end phones at this point, the Nord wasn't quite out yet, We had companies coming up with their own flagship killers. Most of you probably remember Poco was making some interesting phones. And the X2 Pro was a high-end offering with an amazing chip, massive battery, super fast 50-watt charging for the time, which was even faster than what OnePlus was doing, a quick 90Hz display, a decent primary camera for way less than the other phones. I was personally thoroughly impressed with this phone at the time, and though it might not make headlines for everyone, this was one of the best flagship killers at the time. And I'm not sure the Pixel 4 and XL could really be called major successes given the finicky and power-draining radar-based facial and gesture recognition hardware in the massive forehead of this phone, but it was a time when Google was experimenting. You know, we still had Squeeze for Assistant. It was maybe more of a controversial release than a great one, but an interesting one nonetheless. And I know those of you out there who absolutely love the 4 series, I've seen you in the comment sections, so I know there are Pixel 4 XL fans out there. And I know it's not an Android phone, but Apple's iPhone 11 was one of the more interesting ones too. It was the first iPhone to have an ultra-wide rear camera, ironically at a time when Google made the controversial decision to opt out of using an ultra-wide and instead put a telephoto in the Pixel 4. Between the 11, the Pro and the Pro Max, there was 3 mainline options for the first time in Apple's lineup too. There were other interesting and controversial releases, you know, stuff like the Huawei P30 Pro, which of course had a crazy amount of hardware in it. It looked astounding, but ultimately it was destined to fail due to it not having the Google Play services. LG had its V50, which I think is a superb phone with great audio options, but not the most crazy device to come out in 2019. We also had the advent of Xperia's 1 and 5 series, super tall smartphones with great audio outputs and almost built for enthusiasts. I know they're not the most universally loved smartphones, but they all started in 2019. Look, some of my favourite smartphones ever were admittedly not released in 2019. Nokia's Lumia 1020, which used the same size camera sensor as the P30 Pro, released half a decade later. You know, Nokia was doing this back in 2013. The same year, HTC released the legendary One, followed by the One AM8 the year later, Samsung's S3 and S4 a year before respectively, LG's fantastic V30 in 2017, and the Pixel 2 XL to go alongside it. I could go on forever listing my favourite phones, but you kind of get the point. For me, 2019 really turned it up, and it has to be declared the best year for smartphones we ever had. Sure, there are other years that had individual bangers, but I think 2019 hit it across the whole year. The S10 series to P30 Pro, Nokia 9 PureView, OnePlus 7 Pro, Realme X2 Pro, Pixel 4 and iPhone 11. I know talking about the past won't bring back all that cool hardware innovation, but it is fun to have a stroll down memory lane and cover this older stuff in the Golden Era series. Let me know in the comment section if you agree or disagree with my bold claim that 2019 was in fact the best year for smartphones, and if you have a rebuttal, do elaborate. I'd love to hear from you down there. Also, if you agree that 2019 was the best year but I missed your favourite phone, again, let me know in the comments. It was a crazy year. And as always, I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comment section. Whilst you're down there, be sure to hit like if you enjoyed today's content and subscribe to never miss another upload on this channel. Thank you all so much for watching. I've been Ryan Thomas, and I will catch you later. Cheers.